Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and it's so lovely to have you join me today as I interview another guest in conversation. Curious, adventurous, intuitive. Sandy Stamato is not afraid to go out on a limb, because if you're a limb dweller like she is, that's where you live your most fulfilling life. A heart-centered business coach, Sandy has first-hand experience feeling like she wasn't the typical corporate 9-to-5 woman. In her 20s, she learned that as a limb dweller, of course she didn't fit in. This knowledge was the foundation for her success both in the corporate world and as an entrepreneur. Today in conversation, we're going to talk about how women can and should take control of the second half of their lives, how our personal values affect our lives and decision-making, and Sandy's story about the dramatic shift in her life, becoming a limb dweller, and her newfound creativity. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Sandy, and it's so lovely to have you join me for the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Thank you. It's just wonderful to be here.
Now, you're full of energy. I've only just met you, but I can feel that energy from, where are you, over in the US?
Seattle, Washington.
In Seattle. Oh, that's a beautiful place. Yes, I've been there. So, I can feel that energy already. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Now, what I want to start with, though, is you say that you are a limb dweller. And I would like you just to explain to us what that is and, are we that way as well? So over to you on what that means.
Yeah. It's typically the first question people ask me, and understandably so. I didn't know what a limb dweller was either. And so the limb dweller story starts at age 28. And the easiest way that I can describe it is that I came from a very accomplished family. My sisters really were dialed in. Like, my sister knew she wanted to be an attorney when she was in 8th grade. And here I am, 28, I've graduated from college. My other sister's insurance, they all had these different jobs and they seem like they're on their path. But at 28, I didn't feel that way. I didn't know where I fit, and I felt kind of flaky. And honestly, I felt pretty lost. And so I was trying different jobs, and a couple times, like some of us do, right? I tried a different job here, didn't fit. So I tried another job over here. And after this one particular day, and I remember it like it was yesterday, I was so upset. Somebody shamed me. They said they made fun of me because I was once again changing jobs. And they said something really snarky. And I mean, it was a direct hit. It was just like, oh, see, everybody knows I'm a flake. And I burst into tears. And I was so lucky. I had a wonderful mentor. Tracy, she was the blessing in my life. She was my mentor for 25 years. And she just so happened to call me at that moment when I was just beside myself. And she said, after she heard my tale of woe, she said, baby, you're not a flake. She said, you're a limb dweller. And to this day, I am mid-sob. I'm like, oh, I go, what? What's a limb dweller? It's like, what the heck? And she said, oh, babe, there's two types of people in the world. She said, there's trunk dwellers, and those are people that stay at the same job for 30 years. They love what they do. They have a beautiful view, and it works for them. And she said, but then there's people like us, and we're limb dwellers. We scurry up that tree, and we scoot out on the limb. And then what she said is, she said, sometimes it's lonely, sometimes it's windy, and sometimes it's scary. She said, but oh, baby, what a view.
Yes. And I'm just sort of, thinking that there are people like that, aren't they? That, it's such a simplistic way to look at it, I think, because there are people that are trunk dwellers, as you say, where they're in the same job, or they know exactly what they want to do from a young age. They work towards that, they do it, they're happy. And then there are others who just don't fit into that mold. They just not sure where they fit in. And I know myself, back in when I was in my late high school, you know, I look back now and I think we were asked to make choices on what we wanted to do when we left school.
Right.
And I look back now and I think, you know, 17, 18 is so young to really know what you want to do. And they didn't have gap years back in those days.
Right.
And,
Right.
you know, I think you were sort of, you went along a path that you felt you should be doing rather than what you wanted to be doing.
Right.
A lot of the time. So yeah.
It's kind of interesting because the trunk dweller and the limb dweller, like I've talked to people and they're like, well, I want to be a limb dweller. And I'm like, why? You have blue eyes. Why would you want brown eyes?
Yeah.
You know, and it's more of a state of mind. I mean, I worked in corporate America as a limb dweller. It wasn't so much the job, it was the state of, it was my mindset. I just always felt out of sync. And I've worked with a lot of women that spent 30 years at a job and never felt like they were in sync. They were the troublemakers, or they were the ones that caused waves and all this. And, you know, it's so funny. I was thinking about this, you know, to your point that we live, you know, I thought it was just in the US, but clearly it is a belief that culturally, wherever you are, that you should have it figured out by a certain age, right? There's not a lot of room for people to go, I don't know, right? I mean, clearly you just said you felt that way, and I'm assuming some of the listeners have felt that way.
Yes.
And it's very lonely. It is a very lonely place to be. And that's why the idea of the limb dweller has really caught on, simply because, at least for me, as I got older and people were saying things like, why don't you get a 9-to-5 job? And my sister, you know, who's lovely, she just didn't get it, you know? And I looked at her, I remember one time, and I looked at her and I said, I'm a limb dweller. I do things differently. And she looked at me, she was like, oh, okay. You know, but there's no shame in either place. We all have our place on the tree. You know, you can't have one without the other. I mean, that's just how it works.
Yes. And I think it's also about coming to know who you are and understanding who you are and what your needs are. And for so long, you know, you're brought up a certain way, you think a certain way because of your environment, perhaps, and you feel that you can't step out of whatever the societal guidelines are, but you aren't happy. And you can't really put your finger on why you're not happy.
That's right.
So I think that that's a great point to think about. And if we don't take anything else away from today's conversation, it's examining who we are. Are we a trunk dweller or are we a limb dweller? And both are equally,
beautiful,
you know, valuable.
And I do have a quiz. I'll tell you about it at the end. I have Are You a Limb Dweller quiz, which is really fun. I took it off the website and I'm putting it back on because I'm doing a lot more podcasts and people are curious about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I find that women in the second half of their lives, this is for what I find so interesting, second half of their lives, where all of a sudden they have time. They have time to look. And but there's no role models for limb dwellers getting older. I mean, what I saw retirement, which I'm sure most of my peers did, retirement was dad gets a gold watch, you know, has a party, comes home and bugs mom. You know, that's a little Leave It to Beaver, but you know what I mean? I mean, it was just kind of, there aren't a lot of role models like, well, what do you mean you're working till 70? Why? You know, are you that broke? I mean, there's these kind of conversations. So I love the idea that it gives people a vocabulary to be able to talk about it. One of my dearest friends is a total trunk dweller. She owns it. She is a trunk dweller. She was a teacher for 30 years. She's got a retirement. She's got a pension, happy as a clam, retired at 65 on the nose. And it used to be, before we kind of knew this about each other, like, it'd be like, what are you doing? I'd be like, what are you doing? You know, it was like, there's no bad dog in this. It's just the way we are. And to your point again about, you know, getting to know ourselves, for me, what I found is that when there's that type of opening, for myself. Like for me, it was 28. I was very blessed. I had an amazing woman who passed suddenly. And so I've been meaning, this is a tribute to her, calling my business Limb Dweller. But I always wanted to know how where did that come from? I've Googled it. I've looked up, I have no idea how, if it just came to her one day, I have no idea, but what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought, because when I think about Tracy, my sweet beloved mentor, I always kind of pause and take a moment and thank her.
Yeah, well, at least you had a mentor, but perhaps
Yeah.
a limb dweller, as you say, going out on a limb, you're different to everyone, to others, and that's a little bit more precarious being out on a limb than being a solid trunk. So, I've got a feeling. That is it. I've got a feeling I'm going to do the quiz, but I've got a feeling that I might be a limb dweller, and I'm still trying to find which limb I belong on.
You know what? I would be shocked if you weren't. It's funny, after a while, you kind of just get that sense of, we just don't do things quite the same.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like I remember when I was revamping my website, when I really own Limb Dweller. I mean, that's part of my transition. That was part of get to know myself, letting go of the business coach, business consultant, and own the fact that I was a Limb Dweller coach. But I remember there was that, God, I keep thinking about, anyway, carry on. I just lost my train of thought, and it was just a great thought, but you carry on.
Well, that's okay. It might come back to you. But now you've touched a little bit on your story, but what actually prompted you to make that dramatic shift in your life? You said you were about 28 and you were still sort of, was it meeting your mentor that we've talked about, or what prompted you?
She said the right thing at the right time. She said the right thing at the right time. It was the first time I didn't feel shame for not doing what everybody else did. And that allowed me to go into corporations. That allowed me to do a lot of things, because internally I accepted the fact that I was a limb dweller. It wasn't until I was in my late 50s, close to 60, when it's like, Sandy, you own this internally. It's time to externally own it. Align yourself with this. This is what you're doing. And what really helped move the needle a little bit more to really owning that, because it was a big deal. I was afraid people think I was too woo-woo and all this stuff. Yeah. But, and what really moved the dial was that I was at a conference. I was speaking. I was a speaker, and I told the limb dweller story. And I just happened to tell it because it was really appropriate, for what we were talking about. And it was for business owners and whatnot. And this young woman came up to me. She was probably 19, sobbing. And she said, "Thank you. For the first time in my life, I don't feel freakish." And I just gave her this big hug, obviously pre-COVID, but I gave her this big hug. And it was like, oh, honey, there's tons of us. There really are. There's tons. You'll find your people. And and at that moment, I realized that we just need the language. We need, it's a badge of honor. It's not this, you march to the beat of a different drum. And it wasn't a compliment when I was growing up. It was a troublemaker. Yeah. And now it's like, yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it takes us till about, our 50s to find that out, but we can actually help encourage the next generation to, follow that path a bit sooner. And it's also, as you say, you accepted that internally, but you didn't, there was still something holding you back from, wearing that badge of honor and shouting it from the rooftops. I'm a limb dweller. I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, my background, I mean, I've been self-employed, but I've always, I worked in network TV. I worked in advertising and marketing. I mean, I was a limb dweller within those jobs. And when I had my own business, I always knew that was my spirit, but truly owning that, that's why I became a transitional coach, because it was a transition into, and it was at this age. Now I work with women 45. The oldest woman I've worked with was 78 years old.
Wow.
God, I love that woman. It's because age to her was like, whatever, I've got some stuff to do. I'm like, great, let's do this. She just owned it. Yeah. But yeah, so that was, for me, it was just really, it was actually quite terrifying, because of that feeling of like, that feeling of, what if people laugh at me? What if I get called a flake again? And what I noticed is that when I owned it and I became aligned, the inside and the outside matched.
Yes.
Everything changed. And believe me, nobody was surprised. You know,
No.
they
No.
know me. It wasn't like, oh, Sandy, oh my gosh, what are you doing? It's like they
Yeah.
knew that that was the spirit of who I am. So,
But that comes back to the point that many of us, many women I speak to, and I know myself, we're just worried too much about what other people think. And what they're going to say.
yeah.
And we live sometimes a bit of a lie, because we're living the way we think other people want us to live. Doesn't matter that we're unhappy inside, we're fitting in. Whereas there's that sense of relief when you actually accept who you are and you go with that, and you still might worry what other people think, but you get stronger the more you believe in yourself and the happier you are. I think that relief that you feel, well, I know who I am, and it doesn't matter what others say. I'm following my authentic self.
Absolutely. And I have to say that I was very blessed to be raised by a mother who loved getting older. My mom loved age, which is so interesting. She loved getting older. And I've told this story before, but it's worth sharing again, because my mom would call my sister. She'd be like, girls, come on. Guess what? The 40s are the best. And we'd all be like, oh, yeah. It's like, and then she turned 15. She's like, oh, my God, you wouldn't believe how life changes. 60 was the magic elixir, which I believe is true as well. And then she said 70, oh my God, that's when life begins, and it wasn't until she fell at 79. My mom had such an appreciation for age. So that is a huge component in that. That's why a lot of the work that I do is working with the mindset about age. Like, what do you want to believe? What have you believed, and what do you want to do going forward? Not in the rearview mirror, but what do you want to go, doing forward? Because I think that close to 60 is where I've noticed there's something that happens. Kind of, it's
Definitely, yeah.
Look at your face. Absolutely,
yeah,
there you
definitely.
go. Yeah.
If I'm looking back, I thought at 50 I made a major shift.
Right.
But
yeah.
when I reach 60, and I'll be 65 this year, I just seem to go to a different level again. And I really, touch wood, I'm healthy, and so I can do lots of things. So I don't think I'd want to be any other age at the moment. I'm just really happy being in my 60s. And it used to be that 50 was the golden age, and that sort of thing. But I think you're still struggling with things in your 50s, and it's when you turn 60 that you go, hey, I don't know, something happened to me, and I think it happens to other women as well.
Oh, me too. And we'll probably, when we turn 70, we'll probably go, oh, 60s, look at the 70s.
That's right. I think it could also be that we don't dwell on what age we are. Like, I try not to let age stop me. I've run 4 marathons in my 60s. I ran my first one at 55.
Oh,
I started my podcast in my 60s. I got my group fitness instructor and personal training certificates in my 60s. I mean, I think
just for the record,
the 60's the new 50, maybe, or the new 40.
You can take the quiz, but I think you're pretty good. We'll go ahead.
Anyway,
that's exactly it. I love that. I love that, because, and again, when you talked about at the beginning about how what we're doing is helping those that come up the ranks after us, we are going to become the role models. But right now we don't have role models.
No.
So there's some really strange, like, I have talked to women who, like a woman I know who's a teacher who's, she wants to work till, she's 70, and she loves working. She's in her stride. She loves it. And she said, you wouldn't, and you just don't look, you don't look at her and go, oh, she must be older. You just think she's a teacher and doing what she's doing because she's active and everything else. And she doesn't feel that age, but there's the pressure she's starting to get, and so it's really, I think, I mean, that's kind of to me, the age thing is parallel with the limb dweller, because
Yes.
what I've noticed with the women and the men, I've been working with amazing men lately. This is not just this is a human issue, but I've just noticed that people that are curious and people that give themselves that little bit of space to kind of explore a little bit. I mean, it's phenomenal what happens by owning oneself. And I know that sounds like a bumper sticker, but I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it, but I have some really fun, creative ways that I've worked with people that just feel really blocked around that. Like they're being called forward, because I do believe, if we march with a different drum, I think all of us have like a little drum beat. And as we get older and we look at like, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I'm not stuck on this age thing, but let's be real. There's going to be a period of time where I may not want to do a podcast. I may not want to be a coach. I may not want to do, whatever. I mean, so I want to make this count. I want a legacy. I want to make this count because this is my time. So I just think it's such a, I just feel really blessed that I'm the age I am and the time I am. The world's going, there's all sorts of stuff going on in the world, but when it all comes back home to roost, I'm so grateful that at 28 years old, I learned what a limb dweller was.
Yes.
And it changed one sentence, one comment, changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be that simple, isn't it? Sometimes we're trying to find answers and we're just making it too complicated. We're overthinking.
Way too complicated.
Okay, so we've talked about limb dweller, and we've sort of touched a little bit on how, women, first of all, they've got the first half of their life. We'll talk in halves. And, we wear all these different labels where we have a career. We have some of us, married. So we're a wife, we're a mother perhaps, right, or a partner, or we've got all these different labels, a daughter, a friend. We wear all these different labels, and then as time goes on, we've still got those labels, but they're not quite as relevant to us. Our children grow up, we move on to different things, and then we find ourselves in that situation where we think, well, who am I as an individual? So what I would like you to talk about is how can we come back to being ourselves and find our individuality again, find that person who we are rather than being somebody's mother or wife or friend or daughter.
Yeah, you're talking about a big issue, which is, the identity. Who am I without the title, right? I think that's actually probably the next to legacy, that's the biggest reason why people come and talk with me, because it's a vulnerable place to be, male or female. I think female, probably I work with more women around that issue because it's very vulnerable. And again, no role models. And so who am I? And so one of the first questions that I always, or one of the first exercises I do with my clients is we look at the values from the rearview mirror. We look at your values, and I used to roll my eyes when I'd hear values because it was like, oh God, don't talk to me about core values. But it's very different because when we're looking from the rearview mirror to say, this is what was important to me, stability, that's, because I had a family. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoop, we're going to look forward. What are the lens you want to look through? And that is the beginning. Just that moment is the beginning when people start opening up a little bit. And then once that happens, I work and they're clear about what the value is, meaning like, how do they want to step into even the coaching experience that we're having? How do you want to do it? And it's just like, and all of a sudden it starts tapping into that drum beat. And it's like, well, what do I want to do? And after that, I call it a clearing. It's kind of amazing to meet oneself again after being everything to everybody. Really. And so it's to meet oneself, and that's why it's so vulnerable. So I do something called the board of directors, the internal board of directors. And so what I do is I have there's a whole explanation. We go into detail about it, but they get an exercise where they have an aerial view. It's a worksheet. It's an aerial view of a table, a conference table with all these empty chairs. right? And so their assignment is to put down a decision that they have to make. So a decision, a big decision, like, should I start a new business? Should I just retire and sit on a beach? Should I, whatever that is, a big juicy one. And then what I say is, get a piece of paper and let's just write all the comments. And once they write the comments, then we give them a name. So for example, I have JJ, who is Judge Judy. Very, very opinionated, might I add. I have Fatty Annie, who has a lot of comments about my body. I have, I call her the big C, who is Cruella, who is just mean, mean, mean. I have Compassion. So I have all these characters, and I am the president of the board. And the idea is that it is up to me to listen to what I want to hear and what's going on in my head. I do it on paper, and then that starts a whole new conversation. And the reason why it's so powerful is because some of us have lost our way. We've lost our way so much. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm a certified voice dialogue practitioner. And so one of the things that this is kind of an outgrowth of that, but it's a playful way of finding out who's on board. And see, the thing is the ones that are the loudest may not be the best input for decisions. So sometimes I make decisions and I just go, whoa, that was not a good one. There might have been quieter people that had more to add to the conversation. And so once I get everybody named, I do this in the morning, and it has literally rocked my world. I'll have something going on and I'll say, okay, what's going on? And I'm the president. See, this is the thing. I am the president. These are my board members. And I have also invited other board members. I've chosen board members like Compassion, the wise woman. I've invited other board members to join the table, right? So it's like the meeting, we call the meeting, and then it's like, what's going on? And I literally just write it down. And sometimes I'll literally, this sounds kind of kooky, but I'll literally say, okay, I've gotten enough information. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. If you two, especially Judge Judy, if you guys want to talk some more, you can take it offline, but I'm clear on what I need to do. And that is how I started to really tap into who I am now. I mean, really tap in, but more importantly, it's like, I get to choose.
Yes.
I get to choose. That was really interesting. I don't think that's what I'm going to do, but I appreciate your feedback. Nobody's bad. There's nobody, I don't try and, stuff anybody in a closet, but it's just like, so I hope that makes sense, because it's something that I've been doing for a while now. And yeah.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that's not a bad idea. Probably you need to train yourself to do it, but it is a good way to look at, major decisions, especially to have that feeling that you're listening to other people who are within you. You've said your board of directors, and you're actually, I think, doing it. This process makes you look at all the different responses or aspects of it, and so you're not just making it from one point of view. It's making you think of all the different points of view from all the different people on your board of directors to what they think. And I like that idea, because
I do it in the morning. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I just sort of think sometimes I'm quite hasty with my decisions, and I'll just go off, I'll knee jerk, and then I'll think, oh, why did I say yes to doing that? Or why did I decide to do that? That was a really bad decision. And perhaps if I'd taken time, so for people like me that can be quick to make decisions and not think them through properly, this can be a very good exercise to say, hey, wait a minute, let's call a meeting and let's just take 5 to have a look and hear about how they all feel about it and what their thoughts are. I still might go and make the wrong decision, but
you're the president.
Yes, but at least you've sort of stopped and thought it through a little bit more fully. So that's what I think. Yeah, exactly. I like that idea.
Well, and it's also one of the, yes, and thank you. I mean, I wish I could say I came up with it, but I just took it a step further, because what happened when I first started doing this work is that it was just all this, criticism, negative, because that was the loudest voice. So So for example, I'm just going to speak about my body. I had a voice that was just, I have a voice that's cruel, that calls me chubby, tubby, lubby, you know, whatever. It's just not nice.
I think we all have that voice.
Absolutely. And I call her, Fatty Annie. And I invited another board member, and she's called the Strong One. And she's this woman that talks, this sounds so insane, but I can't tell you how freeing it is. I say, okay, you two sound like you need to say something. And they literally, it's like Fatty Annie will say this and Strong One will say, I can understand how you feel that way. Let's talk, they actually kind of have their points of view. And then as the president, I get to decide. I keep saying the emphasis on this because when we get stuck and we feel lost, and I'm saying it very universally,
yes,
it is so hard to move forward. And it's such a hard place, and especially as we get older and these big decisions are coming up. So that's part of the work that I do with limb dwellers, just because it's playful. People step into it very easily. I'm not saying trunk dwellers don't, but these are my people. I work with my people.
Yeah. And I would think, I would assume, rightly or wrongly, that a trunk dweller does not make decisions quickly or easily. They tend to really take their time, perhaps.
I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that matter of fact, my buddy who is a trunk dweller, she loves the idea of the board of directors. She's just much more, her style is much more methodical, but she loves it. I think it's a human condition that we feel stuck.
Yes, you're probably right there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. But that was a great point and a good exercise for us all to do. And the thing is, I think that at our stage of life, we've got the time to do that. What we need to do, and what you're doing, is trying to help people earlier in life, perhaps, that not to wait till they're 60 or 70 to be able to have that resource to use and perhaps get to where they want to be if they're a limb dweller, a lot faster than perhaps what we did, because as you said, we didn't have any role models. So we're sort of going along with trial and error and doing what we think is right and learning from what wasn't. So
right. And it's usually people come and talk about that when things are, it's that willingness. And I know we have other things to talk about, but anyway, I was going to say something, but let's go ahead. Carry on.
No, that sounds great. Now tell me a bit about the quiz.
Oh, quiz.
Seeing that you brought that up before, so we'll do it before I forget about it.
Absolutely. I used to have it on my website. I'm putting it back on my website because I've had some other people ask about it, but it's just a really playful way of, it's like 10 questions. You say yes or no, and then it just percentage wise rates where you're at. And then you have a key, the key answer. And it just talks about, if you've got this amount, chances are you're a trunk dweller. Yay. It's all yay, right? If you're here, you might have some tendencies worth paying attention to. If you're here, you're leaning this way. And if you're here, welcome my people. So it just gives people kind of a little bit of it's playful, but it's surprisingly effective. I mean, I did this I did a wise woman journey. It was an international symposium last year. I think it was the year before. And I did it for, anyway, there was a woman from Slovakia. There were people from Cape Town. There were people from Nigeria and from Madrid, from all over the world listening to this thing. And they all took the quiz.
Wow.
And I talked, it was amazing. The woman from Slovakia, who grew up in a communist country most of her life, is now at this age where she's saying, you know what, I have this drum beat, but I've never had the freedom like we do. I've never had the freedom to explore. It was pretty terrifying and exciting for her. She was amazing. I mean, so I talked to all these different people from different cultures, and I realized that this isn't just a US American, this is a universal thing. There's just some of us that have a spirit that is what it is. Like we have brown eyes. Somebody has brown eyes, somebody has blue eyes. So it just is what it is. So the quiz is fun. I will send you a link, and for listeners, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I will make sure and have it up there on my website so people can easily access it.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And do you have any advice for someone who is sort of feeling a bit stuck? We've talked quite a bit about being a limb dweller. We've talked about our personal values and how they can affect our lives and decision making. What's a piece of advice or a couple of tips you can give someone today who's listening, just to make that start, to start feeling comfortable with the idea, I suppose, first of all?
You know, a couple things. It's like most, like shame lives in like thrives in isolation. You know, those feelings thrive in isolation because we don't talk about them. Maybe we don't have the language or have never had the freedom. So my first thing is, if you can find somebody to talk to about it, you know, whether, I don't care if it's a coach, if it's your best friend, if it's something, you know, take the quiz if you want to, have a name for what it is. There's some freedom in that. So the first thing is, honestly, is it's like anything, it's just talk about it, because feeling out of step with the world is really, we're feeling out of step with ourselves. And that is just, there's too much to live for. It's too rich and there's so much juice there. And what I want to say is, if someone feels stuck, it's a blessing. It means that your spirit is arguing, your spirit is fighting for that drumbeat. So it's not like something you want to squelch, because that's squelching your spirit. I always say, look, if you're in conflict, yay, trust me, I don't love it when I'm in the middle of it, but upon reflection, I always realize I'm not going to change unless there's a push and pull, unless there's a push and pull. So if that's the first thing, if you're feeling that conflict and there's something going on, the first thing to do, what I've done, is to make sure and talk to someone. But also, I'm going to put my board game and the quiz up there on my website, and also people can always have a complimentary session, which I do frequently, which I love doing because I love limb dwellers. So that's always part of the gift to do that. And then you'll start noticing, there's some language I have in the quiz, you'll start noticing that other people may have that too. So you may have to, you know, if you identify with limb dweller, if that clicks with you, then that may be a way you start conversations with your own people. But my number one thing is that there's no shame in feeling conflicted. There's nothing, people aren't doing anything wrong. It is the strongest blessing we can have, because that, again, I'm going to repeat myself, your spirit is fighting. Give it a break.
Yeah.
Help it out a little bit.
And I think you were just mentioning then about talking about it and having the conflict, and that's good. And of course, we don't feel comfortable with conflict, whether it's with someone else or whether it's within ourselves. And we tend to push, a lot of us tend to push that down. So we've got that at the bottom there, everything else is churning above it because we're not comfortable.
Right.
But we won't address the feelings that we're having. So I think that that's a good idea of yours about welcoming the conflict within yourself. Really, perhaps at call a board of directors meeting, go through, you know, why you're feeling that way. And we know deep down, well, this is personally speaking, so I shouldn't generalize, but I know deep down how I'm really feeling. And there are times when I go with the flow and underneath I'm going, I don't really want to be doing this, or this is not for me. Who am I doing it for? I'm definitely not doing it for me. I'm not living who I am. And, you know, you do get that feeling, whether you say it's a gut feeling or whatever. I think we all really know who we are. I think it's just finding that courage that you talked about at the beginning to say, hey, I can't do this anymore because it's not me. And I think that, you know, that's one of the things about turning 60 was that, hey, you know, I'm living who I am now. I can't, because there's not, you know, how many more sunsets am I going to see, sort of, or sunrises? Right. So you need to, while you don't dwell on that, you know that, you know, you're not going to live forever. But the good thing is that my daughter, who turned 40, so she's, you know, younger than us. She said to me, I love turning 40 because I can be who I want to be. And I thought, wow, you know, we're getting that message through to younger women in particular, because that's basically who I associate with. But we're getting that message through to them. So see what they'll be able to do by the time they're 60.
You know what? I love that. On my website, I always say, this is your time.
Yeah.
It's wherever you want to put the stake in the ground, and you don't have to do it alone.
No,
you don't. You know, it takes so much courage. But, you know, I think it takes a lot of courage, and just frees up so much energy to stop fighting. And to say, you know what, let me get a piece of paper down and let me stop telling that voice to shut up, because that works so well. And let me just write out what's going on, because there's some information there. So that again has really changed. There's a kindness and a compassion that I have towards myself I've never had before. Yeah. And it started with the board of directors, because I realized that there were just parts of myself that never have always been told to shut up, hush. And by giving myself freedom to just write, there's a sweetness to it. So you know, I'm working with the gentleman. I know we have to wrap up, but I'm working with the gentleman.
No, that's fine.
I'm working with a gentleman right now who is so amazing and is stuck. And this I just love this guy. And his board of directors is fascinating, and just to be able to access it. So one of the things is do it every day, because you know what? It's the most interesting person and people you'll ever talk to. They're you. So it's like, I mean, that literally, and so it's like, it's not like I have to, like, oh, I got to do this. It's so interesting.
Yes.
How fascinating to find out who you are at this age, or whatever age, who you are, and then you get to choose, because you are the president. Yes. I can't tell you how much better I feel about the choices and the decisions I make.
And you know, again, a simple analogy, you're the president. You are in control of your life. You are the top dog. You make, no one else is there.
That's are the top dog.
So, you know, it's a matter of just acknowledging that and accepting that. Now, I could actually keep talking to you for a long time, because I think I've found a kindred spirit. So I'm putting it out there that I'm a limb dweller, I think.
Spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
Yeah, there we go. I haven't done the quiz, but I think I'm there, or I'm more that way than trunk dweller. But before we go, Sandy, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what does being a woman living well mean to you?
It means full self-expression. It means full self-expression. And may I just take a moment and explain why that's so important?
Yes, please do.
One of my top values is freedom. It's also my husband's. Freedom to him means being on a motorcycle in the middle of nowhere, you know, being on a paddleboard with the ocean in front of him. You know what it means to me? It means I could be sitting, God help us, hope this never happens. I could literally be sitting in a cell, in a bed in a cell, and I would be feeling so free if I had full self-expression with myself.
Yeah.
That's what freedom means to me. And that to me is what's living life well. Because what else is there?
Exactly.
Me? And that's the alignment piece. I'm always like, you know, if you feel stuck, yay, but I got to tell you, it is worth the journey, because to, like you've expressed, and I can see it in your face and your eyes, it's the same thing. There's an alignment, and it's our time. It's our time. There's no guilt. This is our time. It's not selfish. It's just our time. And so I just hope our time gets a little younger and younger. But
yes, well, I think we are getting our messages through, and it's just been delightful chatting to you today. As I said, I could just keep going. And there's so much that we can talk about. So perhaps we can get you back to talk on some of the other aspects of the work that you do. But you know, I will be putting all your links in the show notes so people can contact you. They can take the quiz. They can take you up on your offer of a chat to help them get started. So that will be all in the show notes for everyone to contact you. And I hope that they do, because you know, as I said at the beginning, you've got the energy. I can feel the energy, and that helps, I think, to, you know, make people feel enthusiastic, and you know, you bring them along with your enthusiasm. So that's really great. So thank you again, Sandy, for joining me today.
Thank you, Sue. It was lovely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining Sandy and I today. It was great to find out about being a limb dweller, and I think, as I've said, I'm a limb dweller, so I'll be wearing that badge of honor. If you've enjoyed the episode, I'd love you to leave a review or a like, and also share it with a friend, because I know that they will benefit from this topic that we've talked about today. Don't forget to take Sandy's quiz, by the way, and that will be up on her website. So are you a limb dweller or a trunk dweller? It doesn't really matter, as long as you're living your life. So until next time, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life her way. Bye for now.